Is it qualified or is it not qualified? That is the question. Mm-hmm. Stephen, I see you laughing already because I'm sure you probably get this question a lot. My name is Jeff Miles. Welcome to Next Chapter Living, planning your retirement story with financial advisor Stephen Sabo. You can find him online, executivefinancialgroup.com. Let's just jump into it. Qualified money, non-qualified money, your retirement. What's the difference?
Yeah. So we get this question a lot. You know, people come to us and they have all these different accounts and they don't really understand what they are. Maybe one was an old 401k or they've got an IRA, and one is just an account that they started with money that they've already paid some taxes on and it's been growing for a little while. And they say, all right, you know, we want to simplify things. Can we combine these two? And we always have to remind people that you can't combine those two because they're completely different things. And it's a little confusing for them, but we walk them through it. And the difference really is qualified money is money that you have never paid taxes on, right?
Right.
And you got an upfront tax break for and some tax deferral over the years. So an example, your 401k, right?
Sure.
You put money into it. It's before you've paid taxes on it. You get a little bit of a tax break up front, and then any of the earnings in there are tax deferred until you withdraw them from the account.
So quick, before you go any further on that one, because this is one that I'm sure people might be very curious about. So to your point about the 401k specifically, and I put in this money, it's tax deferred. Even the gains on that money are tax deferred, correct? So basically, if, you know, my income currently is in an income bracket of, say, 22%, then I'm saving 22% on the money that I would be taxed on when I'm, you know, working.
Right.
And then I would pay on that money once I take it out in retirement. But the same thing goes for the actual gains on that account as well. So there's no tax on that. And then all of a sudden down the road, you know, we used in a previous example on the 401k episode about, let's say I've got $250,000. Well, and again, the idea of pulling out $250,000 all at once changes everything dramatically, because where I was in a 22% income bracket before when it came to taxes, $250,000 is not at a 22% income bracket.
No, absolutely not. No, it's going to definitely push you up into a much higher tax bracket. And we have to have that conversation with people because, you know, some people just say exactly like you said, let me just yank that out of there. I'll take it and I'll put it in the bank, or I'll, you know, I want to do this, or I heard somebody say do that. And that $250,000 isn't actually $250,000 once it comes out of there. You know, there's taxes owed on it. And so we caution people all the time that, you know, you need to come up with a specific plan on how we're going to take it out of there, because if you do it in one lump sum, you can kiss about 50% of that goodbye because taxes and all these other things that you're going to have to pay for. So.
And then it also actually could kick in taxes on Social Security, for example.
Yep.
And you had no idea that your 401k money would actually hurt your Social Security over here. You're like, wait a minute, they're not even related to each other.
Yep.
They become related when it comes to income and the fact that this is a qualified account with your 401k money. So on the non-qualified type of money, explain a little bit about that. I mean, if, you know, my deductive reasoning tells me that this is basically money that I already paid taxes on when I put it into any kind of investment account.
Sure. And you're correct on that. Whenever you have a non-qualified account, like you said, you pay taxes on it before you put the money into the account.
Sure.
And so now the difference is that growth, whenever the money grows or earns any interest or anything like that, that is where you pay the taxes on. You pay the taxes on the growth, on the interest, on anything like that. And if you aren't deferring it, depending on what type of investment it is, right? If you say you bought a stock in an account, in a non-qualified account, and you paid $1,000 for 10 shares of a specific stock, and it grew to $5,000. Well, you wouldn't necessarily owe any taxes until you sold that on that particular investment. But say you had a non-qualified CD at the bank, right? And you took $10,000 and you put it into a CD at the bank and you earned $600 worth of interest. Whether or not you took that money out, you have to pay taxes on that interest. So there are different nuances in those, you know, non-qualified accounts on when you have to pay the taxes. But the idea is that you've paid tax on the money that you put in, but you owe taxes on any of the gains and earnings or anything like that in it. So
here's a question that I have then when it comes to qualified versus non-qualified money.
Sure.
Many people, they understand that there are ways to kind of take advantage of tax situations based off of, I've got this qualified money over here in this 401k and I just turned 60 years old. Maybe we move that into a different type of account so that we are not necessarily paying in taxes down the road. Are you going to pay taxes on that entire amount when you move it over to a different type of account?
Yeah, you'll pay. It just depends on how much you move. One of the things I think that you're kind of hinting towards is maybe called a Roth conversion, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Where you take a traditional 401k or IRA and convert it to a Roth IRA, which then the money, it's almost like a non-qualified account. Not really, but the money comes out tax free if you use it correctly. And whenever you do those, you do pay the tax on the amount that you move. So if you did the whole thing at one time, you'd pay the tax on all of that.
So I don't want to do all that at one time then.
Normally, it is not a good idea for you, especially if you have a real big balance. If you've got $500,000, you're going to pay some tax, a good amount of tax on that. And so, you want to work with us to sit there and say, we're going to take a look at your tax return, or we're going to take a look at all these different things and say, all right, we'll plug it into some of our computer programs and say, if we did X amount of dollars, it's going to keep you under this bracket. It's not going to bump up your Social Security. You're not going to pay extra tax on this. And it's going to kind of keep us in the threshold that we want to. And we might come up with a plan for the next 5 years, say, to shift that money over time to where it's then tax-free, coming out tax-free for the rest of the time. Other times we might take a look at using some qualified money and some non-qualified money to generate your income.
Sure.
And some of that money is going to be taxable, but some of the money that comes out will not be taxed. It might be principal or something, you've already paid tax on the dollars.
Right.
So you might not have to pay tax on any money coming out. So we'll do that. And you might be getting $50,000 of income in retirement, but say only 30 of it or 25 of it might be taxable because we used some of that non-qualified money over there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
See, I think a lot of people may not understand all of these different, and to be quite honest, and this to me is part of where, quote unquote, the system that isn't really a system that exists.
Right.
Is really kind of, it feels like a penalty on retiring because, again, when you're getting all this going, it's so much easier to put it in. It's the taking it out that becomes very delicate when it comes to the difference between this qualified money and this non-qualified money. And those tax implications can be just astronomical if you make the wrong move, right?
Yeah.
I know that RMDs kick in for, different types of accounts at different ages. That includes Social Security and includes your 401ks. Are there accounts that you can set up where you're using, I would say it becomes non-qualified money where it's not taxed necessarily, you're talking about, when you take that money out, where it's not taxed and it doesn't impose a tax liability on the other money that I have in my other accounts that I may be withdrawing as well for my income.
Yeah. So Roth IRAs, I think, is something that we were talking about, before whenever I said a Roth conversion. A Roth IRA is simply, it's kind of like a regular 401k, but the difference is you've paid tax on the money before you put it in.
Right.
You get tax deferral on all the gains and interest and everything in there over time. And then when you draw it out, if you draw it out by the guidelines that are written by the IRS, they say you got to be 59 and a half and you have to have the account for 5 years or 5.5 years, and then you can draw it out tax free. And so that's a really good benefit because you've got all that tax deferred growth over time that then you can now draw out tax free if you use it properly.
And does it count as income when I take it out from something like a Roth IRA?
No, it's not going to count as income because you've already paid taxes and you're using their guidelines, the IRS's guidelines that say if you use it by these certain standards, then that's how the money is going to come out. Again, you're paying the taxes. They want you to pay the taxes up front. So you're paying it before you put the money in, but they're saying, hey, you can let it sit in there and grow, and then you can take that money out tax-free in retirement.
One of the biggest things that I think is a takeaway from everything we're talking about so far, Stephen, is the fact that I should be thinking about this a lot sooner than, say, 65, 70 years old when I decide to retire, because I can set myself up for a very advantageous situation, not only on an income side when I'm retired, but also from a tax benefit, because And you tell me if my brain is kind of working in the right way here. Mm-hmm. If I decide I want to take some of this qualified money, right, that I have accumulated over the years and say, I know that at 59 and a half is when I'm allowed to start withdrawing that without penalty. Doesn't mean I'm not going to pay taxes on it, but it's without that 10% or whatever penalty that they throw on there for early withdrawal. So if I start taking that out in increments where it makes sense for me from a tax standpoint, and all of a sudden I retire at 65 years old. Let's say I don't necessarily need a huge chunk of this at 65 when I retire. You may have to wait 5 years before you can actually start to withdraw that. So let's just say that if I've got $500,000 in this 401k, and over the course of 5 years, I take out, let's say $100,000 this year, move it into this Roth IRA, $100,000 next year, same thing. That basically by the time I hit 65, the first one that I set up, I can actually start withdrawing at that point.
Yeah.
And it's not counted as income against anything else like Social Security or whatever it may be. And so it's not going to hit me on a tax burden down the road.
Correct. Yeah. One of the biggest things that we see in retirement and we help retirees with is tax planning. Yeah. And that's simply because, 401ks, they came about after pensions, like we had mentioned in a previous episode, you worked for a company. That was kind of your reward. You were there 30 years and now you have this nice pension. They're going to take care of you. It's not quite like that anymore. People are jumping around jobs. They're not working, at the same place for 30 years. Companies aren't offering pensions. And so 401ks came about, and they were really great because they allowed you to put money into it, defer all the taxes and everything. But what you were doing is, creating a big tax bomb in retirement, because
that's the way I see it, right?
Yeah. You've created this big pot of money, which is really nice, but every single cent that comes out of there is taxable. Mm-hmm. And so now, if you need to create an income and you might need $50,000 to be drawn from there, every single cent that's coming out of there is going to be taxable. So we want to find that balance. And it's really important, to start, like you said, early. We even say, hey, I personally think that people should start as early as possible planning. Yeah. You don't have to get complicated. There's not a whole lot to do when you're younger, but at least having an understanding of what you want to do in retirement and how you want to get there is really good, because then the earlier that you plan, the better it can be in retirement. Because like I said, those 401ks are a giant tax bomb. And so if you come to me right when you retire and say, all right, how do we fix this? Well, you're going to be a couple years into retirement before we can start getting you that tax-free money, because, that's how it's set up. All that money's taxable. So we're going to have to do some transfers. We're going to have to do a few things. Yeah. But, if you start planning early, then we can take a look at it and say, hey, look, you can start putting away tax-free money, because again, those 401ks, they were really great when they came out. But they deferred all the taxes and created a tax time bomb, if you will, for retirees. Yeah.
So it's interesting you bring that part up, because the more that I've learned about 401k specifically, the more that I'm curious about, qualified accounts and how advantageous is it for me to use them even at a young age, when you're starting in, you're really starting to get into the accumulation of what you hope to have for retirement down the road one day. Right. And how much am I really saving on the tax? Am I just saving today? Because down the road, I'm going to pay taxes on all of it, once it is all built up and everything, like you said. And for anybody who understands how compound, interest works, the actual money that you've put in during 30 years of, let's say, a 401k, let's say you've actually only put in $100,000. So that's $100,000 of income over the course of time where you weren't being taxed on it at a low rate. But because of the compounding, now you have that $500,000 in this 401k. Mm-hmm. And so back to the previous episode of taking it all out at once. Yeah. Well, the tax implications of all that growth, now you're being taxed on it, at a way higher rate than you were when you were accumulating that through the years.
Sure.
And so I do believe that for people that are listening to the podcast right now, and we talk so much about how to help people in their retirement, today and currently and things like that. But if I were to be able to bring boomers and millennials together on any one thing, I think it has to do with retirement. And the reason I say that is because it's stressful enough for the boomers when it comes to retiring. If you're a baby boomer and you're like, you're in the thick of like retirement planning, retirement withdrawing, you're trying to live in that world right now, you already understand that it becomes confusing. It can be difficult. For the millennials that are out there, we're talking about systems that could change drastically between now and the time that you reach that age of retirement. And so planning for these types of situations, planning for that now, a boomer would be giving you that wisdom of start now.
Yes.
Do not wait.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're absolutely right there, because, the more that you wait, the more you're going to miss out on things like you said, compounding interest, and just being able to accumulate enough over time to have that in retirement. And so I say that to people all the time. I talk to our clients, children, grandchildren, things like that. And we're big on get them started as early as they possibly can. It's really going to give you a heads up. And I think that, a lot of the boomers that you would talk to now, the baby boomers that you would talk to now would absolutely say the same thing. You can't rewind time. You can't turn it back and go back and redo it. And, there's a lot of people that we've met that said, I wish I would have done something a little bit sooner.
Right.
And so, we tell people all the time, start as soon as you can. It's not too early, even to start planning for your retirement. If you think, okay, well, I'm only 50, I don't need to start thinking about it yet because I might not retire until I'm 65. That's 15 years.
Yeah.
Well, although it might still seem early, it can really make a difference starting at that age, planning for that, because it can make a huge heck of a difference on taxes, on, how much you've saved, on all kinds of different things down the road. So,
I'll tell you, this is kind of just a side note, Stephen, and it kind of applies a little bit to, what we're talking about when it comes to compounding, qualified versus non-qualified money.
Yep.
I installed a compound calculator on my daughter's phone so that she could understand how length of time that small amounts of money can grow, that the sooner you start, and I know this is going to sound really almost counterintuitive to a lot of people, the sooner you start, the less you have to save.
Absolutely.
Because eventually it all grows into a place of a much bigger, nest egg, so to speak. I would imagine that many of the baby boomers out there who, through the course of their life, one of the biggest pieces of wisdom that they would probably, pass down to future generations that are going to be retiring one day, and that is start earlier. I don't know that there's anybody, even if you started at 25, that person retired right now would probably tell you, well, if you had started at 22, imagine what you'd have, right?
Yeah. I mean, how many articles do you read that say if you start at, 18 and you got 8% compound interest over the years, and by the time you were 25, you'd have this, where if you started at 25 and that same 7 years later, you would probably have a little bit less. And so, it's funny that you say that, because I think, the baby boomers were the saving generation. They did a really good job at saving, but maybe they didn't have all the knowledge, or there weren't these things that are available now that weren't available back then, where today's the younger generations, they're not quite the savers. They like to spend, they like to enjoy themselves. And I'm okay with some of that, but I think that it is really important. I always say, pay yourself first. You're the first bill that you should be paying. Put some of that away, even if it's just a very small amount. Like you said, Jeff, put a little bit away. And over time, that little amount is going to grow, and it's going to keep growing and growing. And once you get to a certain point and it gets to a certain amount, it really starts, you see that pickup and you say, wow, man, this is, now it's really starting to come together. Those few dollars that I was stashing away, 10 years ago have really grown. And now it's just, it's the snowball effect, and it's really rolling. And that's what can build that wealth over time.
I'm going to throw this out there for anybody, any of the young people that could be listening. And if you are the baby boomer who is retired right now, you would probably be able to see this as almost a way of life. And that is that, to your point, the millennials or the spenders, they don't know a life without debt, right? So they just see debt as something that is very normal. Whereas the baby boomers really saw saving as something that was very normal. And that's just what you did. I would encourage the spenders out there, consider yourself a debt because one day you will be. Yes. You will be your own debt down the road one day. Yep. And if you pay yourself, like you said, as if you were paying your credit card bill or your car payment or anything like that, you're actually paying yourself in the form of what is a future debt to yourself, because a lot of people don't necessarily see it this way, but I see retirement as all of a sudden now I'm self-employed and I am my biggest expense.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. You were definitely correct on that. Yeah, it's a completely different ball game when you go from you're working, you have the paycheck, the accumulation years, to what we call that retirement phase, and that flip of the switch. And now all of a sudden your world's upside down. Everything's changed. You have to figure out how to budget, save the money, make sure it's there for you, make sure it's going to last, and that you're not overspending. It can get pretty complicated. So,
well, listen, if you are someone, you have questions right now about the topic today, which is qualified money versus non-qualified money, reach out to Stephen Sabo, financial advisor there at Executive Financial Group. You can find him online, executivefinancialgroup.com. And one of the things that I'll say about this too, Stephen, and you kind of jump in here with your thoughts on this. When you're getting into retirement, the difference between qualified and non-qualified money is a huge thing. Yeah. But you can actually set yourself up in your younger years, understanding the difference between qualified and non-qualified money as you're saving for that retirement down the road, and understanding how to use that balance, even from a young age, getting yourself to that point that most of us didn't think about when we were younger, right?
Right. It's funny, the stuff that you don't think about when you're younger and that you really think you look back on and you wish, man, I wish I would have paid a little bit more attention in whatever it was, because now it's coming, now I need these things. And so, financial education for me is a big thing. I think it's important because I don't think, even the people that are older, there's still a lot of older people are the clients that we primarily work with, the baby boomer generation. Even them, they still, you talk to them about certain topics and it's still over their head. They don't know, or they've got bad or misinformation from somewhere along the lines. And so it's really important to be educated on these things. So that, look, you don't need to be a financial advisor. You don't need to do any of that. You don't need to know any, of the super important topics. But I think it's important to understand some of these differences, qualified versus non-qualified. Yeah. When should I start saving? Should I do it when I'm 18 or should I do it when I'm 29? Different things like that. There's a lot, and it's really important to be educated on those things. In my opinion, again, I might be a little bit biased, but I think that these are very important things. So.
Well, and the cool thing is, Stephen, is that people can talk to you because this is what you do for a living. This is what you spend your whole life really kind of looking at. So I know the rest of us, this isn't what we do. So it's good to talk to somebody who this is what they do, right?
Yeah, no, please come talk to us. We love to sit down and talk with people. Hey, at the end of the day, I can't spend all my time just talking and not doing any business. I do have a business. I got mouths to feed, things like that. But I love talking to people. I love educating people. And even if we didn't do business and you were able to gain some knowledge from me and you said, you know what, he's a pretty good guy. I like that, Stephen. And I think he's pretty knowledgeable. So come sit down with us. We'd love to go over some of these topics with you.
All right. Very good. You can find more information online at executivefinancialgroup.com. Again, executivefinancialgroup.com. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast if you'd like more of this education, more of this information that can really help set you up for your retirement. And again, these are supposed to be the times when you are kind of wanting to put it on autopilot, right? Then definitely listen, make sure you're subscribed and you have notifications turned on to know when you're going to get new content coming from it. So thank you so much for listening. This is Next Chapter Living, planning your retirement story. I'm Jeff Miles, financial advisor, Stephen Sabo. Stephen, have an awesome rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great week as well.
The opinions expressed by Steven Sabo and guests on this podcast are their own and do not reflect the opinions of this podcast station. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Investments involve risk and unless otherwise stated are not guaranteed. Past performance cannot be used as an indicator to determine future results. Any strategies mentioned may not be suitable for everyone. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. Before acting on any information mentioned, please consult with a qualified tax or investment advisor to determine if it is suitable for your specific situation. This program is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to subject covered. Investment advisory services offered through Virtue Capital Management, LLC, VCM, a registered investment advisor. VCM and Executive Financial Group are independent of each other. Pennsylvania Insurance License number 670429. Any guarantees mentioned are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company and may be subject to caps, restrictions, fees, and surrender charges as described in the annuity contract. Steven Sabo and/or Executive Financial Group are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency.